So welcome again, everybody. The lesson now is recorded. Today it will not be streamed on YouTube because we decided to share all videos of this course directly on our channel on YouTube in the playlist dedicated to this course, and all videos, of course, included today's lesson, will be available from tomorrow on with no limits of time, so forever and for everybody. So it's like a Christmas present in advance. So during Christmas, you will follow and listen again all the lessons, if you please. As usual, questions will be we will be very happy to hear your questions. I leave the floor to Carlos.
Thank you, Costanza. Thank you for the introduction and welcome everyone to the last session of the course on 3D digitization. I will share my screen now. You can see it?
Yes.
So I was saying thank you and welcome again. This is going to be the last class and the last session of this course that we have been focusing on the work of the Factum Foundation and how it is our approach to understanding 3D technology, 3D digital recording technology for the preservation of cultural heritage. So in the last sessions, we have been looking at different methods of recording, different technologies that we use constantly in many projects for capturing the shape and the texture of artworks and other original elements. And we had the opportunity of looking at specifically at three systems, which are the Lucida 3D scanner for low relief objects, close range photogrammetry for recording shape and also texture of volumetric elements such as sculpture, but also architecture elements, etc. And the last day we were looking at this new development focused on the photometric stereo recording, another new method that we are trying to develop in order to capture, even with higher resolution, the surface of low relief objects. We also were looking at ways of using this information. So for us, it's clear that the first step and most important step is to have a proper archive of elements that maybe they are in danger of change, or they are deteriorating, or they are going to be experiencing some kind of deviation from their original status. So once you have the data, what are the things that you can do with that? Once you have make sure that you have recorded proper information, there are different ways of using the information for helping the preservation of the original. So this is why also in previous sessions we were looking at different methods of fabrication, that is to bring the digital information back into the material world again, in combination with craft skills for creating facsimiles. And this is one of our main fields of expertise. And in a way, the way we are understanding facsimiles and physical reproduction in general is, as I was explaining in the previous days, as a way to demonstrate or as a proof of the quality of the digital data that we recorded. But at the end, I would like to insist on this point. Having the digital data is the main and the essential part of our approach to preservation. We were also looking at ways of disseminating the digital information that we obtained. And this is why looking at online access to high resolution data through, for example, multi-layered files or other methods for sharing information globally, it was also a very important part of the digital preservation approach. So we were looking at all these concepts and methodologies through specific case studies. I was trying to show you how we are applying all these ideas and this approach to real cases, to real projects in which we had to find new ways of applying existing technology and new developments into giving solutions to practical problems that we were facing in our daily activity. So it makes sense that for the last class today, we will be talking about digital restoration. And digital restoration is something that, in a way, it's an increasing field of work. For us, is becoming more and more important because it represents very well our idea of non-contact preservation. And this is the key of the approach to digital restoration, that it is something that allows you to, in a way, bring an original object back to its previous state, or propose alternative ways in which this object or this element could be perceived, but always without ever touching or modifying the original artwork. For this, today, I will be, my colleague Irene Gaumé will be joining me later, because she's the real expert of 3D modeling and 3D digital restoration in Factum. And we thought it was important that she could explain directly the different approaches that she's employing for certain projects. And especially she will be showing you how she is working with specific software for 3D modeling and also for 3D output, mainly for online access to the information. So that will be in the second part of the class, but first I want to show you a general overview of different projects in which we have been applying this idea of digital restoration, which of course is part of the global approach to digital preservation. Basically, we refer to digital restoration, or virtual restoration if you want, in terms of what can you do with the digital data that you obtained out of recording something that exists as a physical, as an original object, and then how can you try out different reinterpretations of that digital data, working with specific tools of image processing or 3D manipulation, in order to recreate or restitute a hypothetical state of that original, always in a digital environment. So that could be applied, for example, to apply colors to a, for example, like in the case of the images on the screen, starting from an existing black and white photograph, let's say an old photograph of a section of the wall of Tutankhamun. It is possible to apply colors to it based on the other recordings that we were capturing from the other walls of Tutankhamun, in order to recreate or bring back to life this fragment that was lost. So when you have fragments that have been lost forever, that the original does not exist anymore, digital restoration, or digital reconstruction in this case, it is something that can, in a way, make them reappear as at least as a digital output. But this is also something that can be applied to shape and relief. And thanks to specific 3D software, like for example, ZBrush, which is something that Irene is using a lot for different projects, it is possible, for example, starting from specific photographs or images as a reference, it is possible to reconstruct or reintegrate areas that have lost original relief, and you can reconstruct them with digital tools. Once you have this reconstruction, either in terms of relief or in terms of color, you can, of course, then create a physical reproduction. This way, what you have is not a facsimile, but is like another version. It's like a physical and material reconstruction of something that does not exist, but allows people to understand what could have been the previous state of that original. And by doing that, you are in a way helping to preserve the original, because you are never manipulating, you are never touching the specific original you are trying to restitute. So a few concepts that are important to this idea of digital restoration is what I mentioned. Is something that is completely non-contact, so 100% without manipulating the original object. Everything that can be done is independent from the original. The process of digital restoration is something that it's gradual, so you can in a way apply different levels, increasing levels of restoration in a way that you can always stop at a certain step and then decide, that is the level of restoration that I want to carry on. Is not all or nothing. It's something that can be understood in levels of intervention. This is traceable in the sense that you can actually trace all the tools that you have used in the work. You can trace all the decisions that the digital restorer has put in place in order to complete a work. And this is very important because with the different software that is being used, you can in a way, as if you were registering actions, and you can always go back to one specific of those actions and see exactly what was done. And what is even more important, you can always keep a differentiation between what is original data that was recorded as it is and what has been digital manipulation that has been incorporated on top of the original. It is also something that allows for multiple interpretations. It's not just imposing one single view of the restorer onto the original object, but because you are working independently from the original, this process is open to incorporate different hypotheses or different views that can in a way coexist as different layers of knowledge or different layers of interpretation, thanks to, again, being away or independent from the original. Finally, the process of digital restoration is by definition reversible. This word about this idea of reversibility has been always considered good practice in traditional restoration. And the concept of what is reversible has been understood differently in different times in history, in the history of restoration. What was considered reversible, let's say 2 or 1 century ago, is not the same as what we consider reversible today. In a way, because we have maybe more tools to analyze changes, material changes in the different elements that we are retouching or we are conserving. But doing something away from the original is by definition something reversible, and the work that you are doing digitally, it's something you can always bring back to previous states of your manipulation. So the projects that I want to present today are examples in which all these ideas are put into practice, and I will be trying to communicate what have been our decision-making process in order to achieve completion of all these different projects. I want to explain a series of projects. I will be going very quickly because I just want to explain the general idea behind all of these works. And as always, I welcome you to make questions at the end of this presentation, in case you want me to go back to repeat any of the concepts mentioned in these different projects. I will be showing you first about 2D digital restoration. That is, anything that has to do with restoring original or previous colors into something that we have recorded. I will start with the Museo Cerralbo in Madrid. This is a house museum that contains an important collection of art, and the way that this museum space was conceived by the previous owner, the Marquis of Cerralbo here in Madrid, is that the house should stay exactly the same as the Marquis of Cerralbo left it in the 19th century. So, for example, one of the elements, that curtain that you can see at the end of this room, this is the way it was working. It's a tapestry that was acting as a curtain. So you have to essentially keep using it as something to darken a room. So it should be put exactly where you could see here in this photograph in order to block the light coming from the window. But of course, over time, this tapestry, which is one of the Verdure tapestries from the 18th century, for conservation reasons, it could not be working exactly like this. So it was necessary at some point to keep the original properly preserved, rolled, and kept away from light, and of course not hanging and being open and closed as a curtain. So this is why we were asked to make a facsimile of that tapestry that could be installed as a curtain in this room in the Museo Cerralbo in order to be working exactly as it is, so that you could keep the original safe in storage while you could use the facsimile with a real function in the way it should be perceived in the house. But then when we started working with this tapestry, which of course we wanted to record with composite panoramic photography, we were given this type of information. It was photographed before. Actually, it was done many years ago in Madrid, in the Instituto de Patrimonio. So all the different aspects of the conservation state of the tapestry were registered in images like this. So as you could see, the actual fabric was losing fragments. There were holes. There were areas that have been broken or tear apart over time. And those areas that have lost material, that have lost the wool or the silk, they were sometimes filled with other patches of material, maybe even, as you could see, joining or fixing other sections of other tapestries. So at the end, it was this combination of most of it was part of the original tapestry, very damaged, but then it was containing a lot of inserts from other tapestries and other fabrics. This is just a damage map telling the different interventions that the tapestry was having in the past in the different areas. So what we did, as we usually do for this type of projects, is first to carry out a proper high resolution recording, a digital photographic recording with the highest possible definition and with the highest possible quality. So we could have all the image of the tapestry with enough quality in order to play with it, in order to be able to manipulate or adjust to the different needs that we will face when making the facsimile. This is a detail of the color information we were capturing of the tapestry. And you could see, because we put a white and clear background for the photographies, we intentionally did that in order to highlight in white the different areas that had holes, that are missing material. We were also carrying out a small section with the Lucida 3D scanner in order to understand what is the material quality in terms of depth, in terms of relief. But we were doing so only of one particular square meter, not applying that to the full tapestry, just as a small sample in order for us to understand what was happening in terms of the material qualities of the relief. But the important aspect of this work is what was done in terms of digital restoration. And a way of understanding this is to compare the work that we did with the traditional restoration method, or let's say the traditional ways of restoring tapestries, and the different levels that can be, let's say, interpreted for making this type of work. When you are about to restore a tapestry like this with physical, or let's say with material tools, there are, for example, a series of levels of restoration that you can do from the, let's say, more general to the specific. A first level, for example, if you are finding areas that have lost material, you can maybe insert any fabric that has just a neutral tone, but with no texture. A second level would be to incorporate a fabric with a general and neutral tone, with a neutral color, but then with a texture and relief that more or less restitutes the original fabric of the tapestry. A third level would be to use different colors, different color fabrics for the different areas of the tapestry, depending on what is the section that you are trying to reintegrate. And maybe a fourth level would be which would be the most specific, that would be the most, would require higher subjectivity, if you want, would be to reintegrate exactly the lost figures or the drawing that has been lost. This is an oversimplification of ways of restoring a tapestry, but this is just to understand that you could always consider this type of works in terms of increasing levels of subjectivity, from the more objective or general, which would be level 1, to the more specific of reintegrating lost drawings. So what would be the correspondence to the digital process that we carried out? Well, it would be working with Photoshop. Obviously, once we have the full color image of the tapestry as a digital file, the way we have to manipulate that information is with image processing software like Photoshop. And then we could more or less follow exactly the same steps that would have been followed as a material restoration, but using specific tools with Photoshop. I will show this with examples. So in this specific detail, this is the current state, and all the white areas, you can see that the fabric has lost material. A first step of restoring would be just to fill all the white areas just with a general plain neutral tone, this kind of yellowish tone, which, as you can see, it has any texture value. It's just a flat color that we could incorporate in Photoshop in order to complete the areas that are lost. Obviously, we cannot make a physical facsimile of a tapestry that has a lot of holes, because at the end we want to be printing an image into some sort of material, into some kind of support. So it was necessary to find a way of filling all those holes. A second level would be to keep that neutral color, but then adding this extra information of the texture that we could be capturing from the other areas from the tapestry. I'm not talking here about 3D texture. I'm talking mostly about the character of the tone that can be interpreted by taking samples from other areas of the tapestry. A third step would be to use specific local colors. So you are not just having a general neutral tone for the whole object. You are just selecting in some areas to use yellow if that's what it is surrounded by. In some other areas, maybe in the background, you are going more for a green color because that's the area that is being surrounded and at that part. So this is something that can be done more or less automatically with the content aware filter in the Photoshop, but there is always this necessity of reviewing what the software has been doing automatically, and it has to be reviewed by the eye of the digital artisan in this case. Finally, the last step, and what that requires a higher level of subjectivity, is actually to complete the drawing, to have to actually invent or imagine what is the figure or what is the decorative motif that has been lost if you want to recreate it exactly. But again, because we are working independently from the original, this is some hypothesis that we can put in practice. So this is the result of, this is the comparison between the result of the digital restoration process comparing with the previous state of conservation of the original. This is an image of the facsimile that we did. At the end, it was about finding a textile, finding a fabric that contained a density of weaving exactly the same as the original, so that when we printed the color on top, because at the end this was not woven, it was printed, the relation between the texture in the image and the texture in the original, in the final material that we are using, they should be coincident. There should be no difference in the density. And this is what we achieved. And then this way we could install the facsimile in the museum in a way that it could actually be used as a curtain, and this way keeping the original safely preserved. One interesting thing about tapestries is that the color that you see at the front, this is the original state, and this is the restored state of the color. It's normally something that is not looking anymore the same way as it should have looked in the past. And if you want to know, if you want to understand what would have been the real colors, the best approximation that you have is by looking at the back. So this is the same detail looking at the front and the back, because the back of tapestries, it's the side in which light has not been affecting that much. So in a way, it has been preserving better the original colors and the original tones. So we started, but we did it only with a small sample, further step in a project like this, which is, could we take the colors from the back and then apply the different transformations necessary in order to have the front recovering in a way the colors that it could have had in the past. And this is what we were trying to do, only as a small test. Very quickly, I will show you that we recently had the opportunity of working with another important tapestry. And in this case, we really had the opportunity of recording the full area of the front and the back. And as you can see in these pictures, the tapestry that we were recording, we had the opportunity of putting it in a horizontal way so that the recording could happen with perfect preservation conditions to the original. It was not necessary to have it pinned to a specific platform in vertical, but we did it horizontally, and we were unrolling the tapestry as we were recording it. We created this bridge-like structure so that the Lucida 3D scanner could be installed scanning facing down instead of as it is usually set, which is recording paintings or any surface vertically. But in this case, we wanted to have the scanner recording and projecting the light beam pointing down. And because the distance is constant, there is no need to be moving the scanner up and down. It is just something that you can be recording the surface in columns and rows, and this way you can obtain a mosaic of scans that you can then align together. This is the final alignment of the different 3D scans that we recorded with the Lucida. And this is the color recording that we carried out also with composite photography using the same bridge-like frame, only changing the scanning head of the scanner with a camera, so that this is the front and this is a comparison with the back. You can see how the colors in a way are better preserved in the back here, especially comparing with the front, that all the metal threads that have been recovered with gold and silver thread have been lost or have been darkened or damaged over time. This is a small detail of the texture that was captured in 3D. This is an overlay between the 3D and the color of the front. And this is the color information without any reference to relief. So if you compare the front with the back, of course, it's where all the edges, all the finishing of the thread are creating this mess of figures. But in a way, you can still compare and trying to understand what would have been something closer to the original colors. Continuing with 2D digital restoration, that is color restoration, we were carrying out this work involving wall paintings in this beautiful hermitage of San Baudelio in Soria, in Spain. This is a very special building because it contains elements from Christian and Muslim and Jew religion all together into this small hermitage in the middle of nowhere in the part of Spain that used to be the border, in between, as part of the Reconquista. As the territories were being gained, these areas remained very critical in terms of preserving the conquered areas. The Hermitage of San Baudelio was once covered with some of the most important Romanesque and paintings, wall paintings of the time. We are talking about 11th and 12th century. But at the beginning of the 20th century, 1920s, they were removed with the strapato technique so that they could be transferred onto canvas and then sold and moved away outside of Spain in order to be on display in different museums. Right now, the wall paintings from San Baudelio, from the vaults and the walls, can be seen in museums like the Metropolitan Museum in New York, Boston Museum of Fine Arts, etc. Some of them can be seen in the Museo del Prado in Madrid because they were bought back in exchange for other elements. But the exercise in this project consisted on trying to record the current state of the walls, and then imagine how could we apply digital restoration techniques in order to bring back the figures that are lost forever. In some cases, we could count with photographing and with digital data of the paintings that can be seen in museums. But in other cases, it was mostly about using what was already there and then cloning, or in a way, to put it very simply, copy-paste from other parts of the wall in order to complete the lost figures. I will show you a small video in which our colleague Ana Paula is explaining how this process works. Probably you are not listening to anything. Give me a second.
No, we don't.
To estimate how long it takes a digital restoration. The first wall painting of San Baudelio took 3 months. So in this case, I don't have the image of the original fresco, so I have to hand draw. This part, for example, is a quite regular geometric drawing. This is the result. It was nearly obvious, but nothing that has been hand painted is obvious. This is the original. I have almost everywhere a path. I spent a lot of time to understand. For example, here I can figure out which is the appearance, the original appearance of the fresco, but it's not so clear. I have not enough information to reconstruct the whole face. I can add arbitrarily information. This is the wall in progress. I'm working on it right now. The original, this is the state of art. This is the original, the restored version. Here, for example, I can reconstruct, but I use a different chromatic code to follow standard conservation protocol. This is a very difficult part, for example. I'm working on it right now. It would be very difficult to retrieve the original appearance of this area. But this is the Last Supper from the Museum of Fine Arts of Boston. The resolution is not so high as we need. This is the wall, this is the image from Boston. This is restoration in progress. So the resulting file can be a normal JPEG or a viewer that allows to see the original state of the wall painting and the restored. Something very similar to digital restoration happens in other fields, such as music. An old Gershwin record sounds very original and pure in some way, but it could be also nice and interesting to listen to the same sound, clean and restored by a technician. The result of digital restoration could be important for historians, physical restorators, conservators, because it can allow them to study the surface, to understand the biography of the wall painting before any work is done.
So, of course, this type of research projects, they are carried out in conversations with experts, with historians, with art historians, with conservators, because at the end, what we are putting, what we are making available are the tools that allow this digital manipulation. It's not something that has to be done only as a game. It is something that allows to put these tools at the service of preparing a proper restoration. And this is why working with the experts is essential for this type of projects. A similar idea or a similar approach is what we were doing with Sala Bologna. I think I mentioned this project before, especially because we were trying to we were focused on making a physical facsimile of the urban view of the city of Bologna, which is at the end wall of this room in the Vatican. But then we also were carrying out a digital restoration process of the wall on the right, which is a view of the province of Bologna with the different towns and villages represented in the landscape. This is something that we captured also with panoramic composite photography. This is the result of the file after joining all the different shots. And we were carrying out also digital restoration to bring back the way that the fresco would have looked like when it was created. So in order to do that, we had to invent things that were not anymore there. Not only elements like the cities or the houses or churches that were represented, but also the actual names of the villages, the actual names of the places. It was also part of the research. And this was also a work that my colleague Ana Paola Ferrara was doing, and it is very well explained in this short video.
Il progetto di restauro della parete ovest della Sala Bologna comincia nell'aprile 2011, quando un'equipe di Factum si trova nel Palazzo Apostolico in Città del Vaticano per un altro progetto, per la scansione della superficie e per fotografare un'altra parete della stessa sala, quella che raffigura una pianta prospettica della città di Bologna. La parete ovest raffigura tutta la provincia intorno a Bologna, Ferrara e Modena. L'affresco è stato fotografato con il Dr. Klaus Panoramic System, una tecnologia che consente di scattare foto ad altissima risoluzione. Il risultato è un file molto grande su cui poi comincia il restauro. Un primo passo è stato quello di cancellare e diminuire le crepe nella parete che disturbavano ovviamente il disegno dell'affresco. Photoshop, che è il programma di edizione di immagini che abbiamo utilizzato per portare a termine questo restauro, offre una serie di strumenti che aiutano molto a questo proposito. Una volta eliminate le crepe abbiamo avuto una superficie un po' più pulita. Il secondo passo è stato la ricostruzione degli edifici. Nella ricostruzione degli edifici abbiamo dovuto far caso al colore, a conservare la texture della parete. Una cosa molto interessante è stata comparare la mappa che avevamo con le mappe attuali, e proprio facendo questa operazione è venuto fuori un caso molto curioso, cioè proprio nella città di Bologna c'era un grande vuoto. Nel sovrapporre la mappa del satellite odierna alla mappa della Sala Bologna, quel vuoto è stato riempito proprio dalla Basilica di San Petronio. Abbiamo quindi ricostruito la Basilica basandoci su una fotografia della Basilica per come è oggi, e abbiamo adattato il disegno allo stile della mappa, marcando comunque con una differenza cromatica l'aggiunta che abbiamo fatto proprio per dimostrare che non era un falso, ecco. Un altro caso molto interessante è stato il castello di San Martino Manzuoli, che abbiamo ricostruito grazie ad un disegno dell'epoca di Ignazio Danti, per cui è stato, ecco, molto interessante ricostruire anche i giardini, i dettagli della torre del castello. Un terzo passo è stato quello di ricostruire e riempire gli spazi che aveva lasciato la tempera caduta nelle colline e nelle acque della mappa. In questa fase è stato molto interessante sperimentare tutte le potenzialità dei pennelli di Photoshop, perché siamo stati in grado, o almeno speriamo di averlo fatto, di conferire un'apparenza degna dell'originale. Purtroppo le cattive condizioni della parete a volte hanno lasciato molto spazio all'interpretazione, però come criterio generale è stato preso quello di conservare il più possibile quello che la superficie originale ci offriva. Ci sono stati anche casi in cui abbiamo trovato tracce di un restauro che si è andato degradando nel tempo. In quei casi abbiamo cercato di conservare le due versioni della mappa. Il risultato di questo lavoro è apprezzabile in un visore che consente di andare dalla versione originale, quindi senza il restauro, come si può apprezzare nella Sala Bologna, a una versione restaurata andando da un grado 0 di opacità ad un grado 100% di opacità.
So in this case of the Sala Bologna, we were not making a physical facsimile of the restored version. It was just an exercise that mainly remained digital. Then continuing, and in order to put one more example of 2D digital restoration, color digital restoration, I think the most extreme case that we have tried is when we had to recreate, because that is what we were asked to do, to recreate a lost Caravaggio. And this is the painting by Caravaggio that was once in the Oratorio di San Lorenzo in Palermo. And in the 1960s, it was stolen. And this is the only image, this is the only color photograph that existed of the painting. Of course, not very high resolution, not very high quality, but when we were asked about the possibility of remaking the painting, like making a facsimile of something that does not exist anymore, the real challenge was, how can we start with the only available information that we had, which is bad quality pictures like this one. Then we could find other sources, other plates that were taken of the painting. But how can we use this very little information in order to create something that was really like a canvas painting, that had a presence and that could be used to complete the altar in the church? In order to do that, we started working, we took as a reference these bad quality images that I am showing you, but also we had the advantage that in the past we had already recorded and we had already worked with paintings by Caravaggio. So these are images of when we were working in the Church of San Luigi Francesi in Rome, recording the 3 paintings of the Cycle of St. Matthew by Caravaggio. We were using composite color photography to obtain highly detailed information of the paintings. And although in this case we were not using 3D scanning recording technology, we were capable of having a proper archive of what it is the real texture of a Caravaggio painting. We could have a good database of all the different cracks, all the different elements of the character of the surface of different Caravaggio paintings that then we could use to be applied onto these bad resolution images of the Nativity in order to start providing layers of character and layers of complexity to the recreation that we were about to do. The project involved many steps, digital and material and physical. And to put it very simply, we were first working digitally to apply different characteristic elements of Caravaggio surface onto the bad quality images that we were using as a starting point. And then we were printing that information in real size, in 1:1 scale. Once we had that, we could keep playing with it, but now on a physical level. Our Jordi, for example, member of the Factum team, who is a painter, was trying to highlight with real paint those areas in the canvas that might have had some more extra relief or some more character, actually painting on top of the print. So turning something that was completely flat into something that already started to have a little bit more of character. And then we took this prototype or this intermediate image and we photographed it again, exactly as if we were recording an original. So we created our own original and then we followed all the usual steps that we do for recording in high resolution an original painting, so that at the end we could keep working on that information digitally. There is this back and forth work between the physical and the digital that allowed us at the end to create something that when we printed that on a canvas support with the specific color corrections, with the bringing in to the conversation the opinions of experts, the views of other Caravaggio historians, it was possible to recreate something that, starting from this image, was something more looking like this. This is a print, a digital print, created digitally, but reproduced on canvas, so that we could install it, and this is what was happening a few years ago. It was possible to reinstall this reproduction or this recreation of the Caravaggio painting made in the 21st century in the original location where it used to be. So obviously, this is not a facsimile, as I was saying before. This is not something that has to look like an original because the original is lost. This is something that has to look like the idea that people have of Caravaggio and the idea that people might have of this specific work by Caravaggio. So in a way, it's even more difficult because you have to try to satisfy infinite possibilities and infinite perceptions of what a Caravaggio is and what a Caravaggio should be. it was a good exercise that put into practice the different tools that we have learned into making facsimiles, but in this case, applied to making a reproduction of something that did not exist. Going into what happens when we talk about color and relief, this idea of combining 2D and 3D information for making a digital restoration process. A good example is what we were doing with this painting of the water lilies by Monet that was on display in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, but was damaged, was fatally damaged in a fire that happened in the 1950s. So the state of the surface is what you could see now on the screen. The state of this water lilies painting looks nothing like it should have looked originally. The fire destroyed another paintings, especially another painting by Monet as well. And this is one that more or less the restorers could keep as a relic. They could actually keep with all these stitches in order to preserve more painting to fall down. But obviously the color or the texture are nothing like they would have been originally. We recorded the surface with the Lucida 3D scanner, with close range photogrammetry, and of course the color, in order to have enough quality data to begin a process of digital restoration. This work was part of a series of projects called Mystery of the Lost Paintings. It involved recreating a series of paintings that have been lost in history, a selection of masterpieces that have been damaged forever, including this Monet, but also a Van Gogh painting, a Vermeer, Gustav Klimt, Tamara de Lempicka, a series of paintings that for one reason or the other, because they have been stolen, because they have been damaged in an accident, like in this case. So for one reason or another, these originals don't exist anymore. So we put in practice all these different technological tools that we had and that we have learning in the past in combination with craft skills in order to bring these paintings back to life, first digitally, but finally as a physical reproduction or a physical restitution. This is the color file of the painting by Monet as we recorded it in New York. It was in storage in the New York University's conservation department of fine arts. So we started a process of trying to recover the original colors, also using as a reference other paintings by Monet, more or less of the same time and the same subject. And this is an example of what was the result at the end of this restoration process. And focusing on a detail, you could see, and also linking to the previous projects that Ana Paula was explaining, thanks to Photoshop, it is possible to fill the lacunae, it is possible to fill the different holes only by using color information from the areas surrounding that lost fragment. You could see different steps in the process. And also, it's interesting to notice that in this case, we also had to create or in a way restore the texture as well as the color, so that this completely damaged relief that was caused by the fire was not present anymore in the restoration of the painting. But playing even more with the relief, this other painting by Van Gogh, these sunflowers, involved even another layer of complexity. And this video explains it very well, actually with the participation of Irene, who will be talking also later in the session.
Recreating one of these still lives, 6 sunflowers, using only a low-resolution picture has its limitations. Fortunately, it's possible to learn a huge amount from the study of one of the other sunflower paintings. The laboratories of the National Gallery in London have undertaken extensive tests on their sunflower painting, and Adam Lowe from Factum Arte has come to take a look at the results. Catherine Higgett has been analysing Van Gogh's use and application of individual paints and pigments in microscopic detail.
And then what's very nice about this new technique that we've recently acquired, which is scanning X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, is that allows us to effectively extrapolate the information, the very precise information about the different mineral pigments that are present. And what we have is a series of peaks corresponding to different elements.
Alongside this colour analysis, Rachel Billing has been using a Lucida scanner, a technology pioneered by Factum Arte, to capture a detailed 3D map of the picture surface. The hope is that Van Gogh's impassioned brush marks can be translated directly onto the painting texture being reconstructed at Factum Arte.
And this is one of the paintings that from the moment we took delivery of the scanner I've wanted to scan, because obviously it has such interesting and amazing texture. You start to be able to see where individual brush strokes have been pushed into each other, and you get to feel that how Van Gogh was working.
What we're going to attempt to do is we're going to attempt to sort of abstract, as if each of these was a letter in an alphabet, to assume he was using the same paintbrushes. The painting in Japan is painted only a few days before this, so we're assuming he didn't get a new delivery, he's using the same brushes, he's using the same paints, and we'll be able to extract these marks and in a 3D modelling software distort them to fit the marks that we can read on the photographic surface of the painting in Japan.
Factum Arte in Madrid, Irene, the digital sculptor, has been working with the data captured from the scan of the sunflowers at the National Gallery in London.
So after we got the Lucida scan from the National Gallery painting, I made a huge collage of all the bits and pieces from that painting and created the sunflower lost.
So what you were basically extracting brush marks and distorting them to fit the shapes that we had
exactly
on the bad reproduction that we've got.
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing, just looking at it cold and not having seen this before, is it's just incredibly exciting. So basically, this is going to be the complete solution to getting that painting to feel like a Van Gogh.
Irene's digital file is now handed over to the modelling workshop, where it's being turned into a physical representation of the painting surface. All that's missing is the final colour data.
From the data that we get in the National Gallery, we are now reconstructing the image from the Sanatsu Memorial Museum, the photograph, and change that colors to a more believable colors, and more close colors to the Van Gogh's palette.
Now the team are ready to bring the whole painting back into the physical world. They start by creating a silicone mold. When the final picture file is ready, it is printed on top of this textured surface. Once everything is perfectly aligned, the final printing gets underway.
So, as you could see, in this case, we had the opportunity of recording the surface of another Van Gogh painting. The one that we were trying to recreate was lost forever in Japan in the 20th century. So we were using a color image of that painting. And on top of that color image, we were applying one by one the different brush strokes, the different texture information that was captured from the existing Van Gogh sunflower painting in the National Gallery in London. So this process is, as was explained in the video, assuming that the brush strokes were working as discrete elements that could be combined in different ways as part of an alphabet, but of course is subjective enough as to be considered like a collage. So this is not something that could be said represent exactly what Van Gogh was using with the way he was actually painting with the brush. But this is a way of adding this layer of extra complexity of the 3D surface onto something that originally, for us, it was only a flat color image of the painting. This is the result after printing the texture with the technique of elevated printing that I explained in previous sessions. After this moment, it's about taking a silicon mold and then cast in a flexible skin that contains a texture and onto which it is possible to print the color with enough quality. And now very quickly, I want to show you other examples in which 2D and 3D reconstructions have been put in practice. The reconstruction of the tomb of Seti I that I showed you before, especially for the exhibition that we created for the Antiken Museum in Basel, in Switzerland, contained, for example, one of the main rooms was the Hall of Beauties. This image that's on the screen now, this is our facsimile of the room, exactly as it was recorded in 2016. But we also tried to create a reconstruction, like a restitution of what would have been the original colors as part of the exhibition. This is completely subjective, and actually it is based on information from Lezione, who discovered the tomb more than 200 years ago, and especially the watercolors that he was using for documenting what he found. So we were trying to apply the same colors, the same color patterns onto our relief that we captured in the original tomb, so that the experience of visiting this recreation could bring visitors back 200 years ago to something that looked more or less closer to the intention of the artists creating the tomb. But then there are other things that you can do. You can also create a facsimile of one fragment of the wall, for example, this representation of the sacred cow, and then you can use projection mapping techniques in order to project original colors, or what we believe could have been closer to the original colors. So in the exhibition, you could actually look at a facsimile of that section of the wall exactly as it was recorded for us, by us a few years ago, and then projecting the interpretation of original colors according to this specific hypothesis. So you have at the same time the physical facsimile, the physical evidence of the current state of the wall with all the scratches, with all the damage, etc. But then you can project new color on top. Another example of this way of projecting digital restoration versions, it's what we were trying to propose for the cloister of San Michele in Bosco in Bologna. In this case, this is an octagonal cloister that used to contain a cycle of wall paintings by Carracci. And as you can see in this image, the paintings have been faded and they have virtually disappeared completely. But there exist engravings and copies of this series of images, these representations. So we were trying to propose the installation of a series of projectors so they could be mapping on this way of changing gradually over time a representation of these engravings that show the scene that the artist was trying to represent on the walls. This way it is possible to combine the inspection of the original wall without any touching with the knowledge that provides this projection of information. This project was a proposal, it was never realized, and actually this is a video animation that we did, but it was necessary to demonstrate what would be the necessary adaptations that are important in order to understand the figures and what is the scene represented here. And finally, talking specifically about 3D information, this is where specific 3D modeling software, organic 3D modeling software like ZBrush, which Irene will explain us in a minute, this is where they can have a lot of information, a lot of importance. When we were in the Cathedral of Santa Maria in Tudela, in the north of Spain, we found that the series of capitals in the cloister were being heavily damaged. Every year they were even damaging even more, and they were changing completely up to a point that the figures represented in the stone, they were no longer recognizable. We carried out a damage map. We carried out this series of mappings, selecting what were the areas that would need reconstruction. And we created this physical reproduction of the current state. Because at that time, I'm talking about 10 years ago, we did not have the tools in order to recreate this type of volumetric shapes. But more recently, when we were working at the Basilica of San Petronio, also in Bologna, and we were recording the main sculptures of the three gates of the facade, which are by Jacopo della Quercia, or in this case, by Amico Aspertini, we were working, as I explained in previous sessions, we were recording in high resolution using white light scanners the figures of the sculptures before they were cleaned and restored by the opificio. So in this case, it was decided by the restorers that the arm of Christ need to be removed from the sculpture in the facade in order to preserve it better. It was already separated from the rest of the body, as you could see in this image. So it was decided at some point to remove it from the rest of the sculpture. We were proposing, because we already had recorded the body on one hand and the arm separately, we could reconstruct in 3D the shape and especially the joining part, so that we could propose to 3D print the arm as something that could be installed in connection with the original sculpture, so that you could preserve the arm safely and then in a way having a physical reconstruction of the arm through techniques of 3D printing. But in order to do that, it was necessary to model a little bit the edge of the arm so it could fit perfectly in the rest of the sculpture. And then once you have your 3D print, you can of course do your silicone mold and then do a plaster cast into something that resembles the original material. And then probably the most complex work that we have done involving 3D digital restoration is what we were doing with this equestrian statue of Canova. This is the way this statue was in the mid-20th century in Bassano del Grappa, not far from Venice. And at some point it was decided by the previous managers in the museum to actually take this plaster sculpture. This is in a way the first model in order to create a bronze final sculpture. But in this case, the plaster made by Canova, it was decided to cut it into pieces in order to move it for another part of the building because some refurbishment was going on. So what happened is that in the process of separating this piece into parts, it ended up broken in much smaller parts, and it has been archived and stored this way since then. We were asked to record each of these pieces individually and then compose a puzzle with all the different fragments digitally, so that, well, fortunately the head is something that was preserved as a unit. But the idea was to use digital tools in order to combine all the different fragments that were recorded independently, and then trying to recreate the lost statue and see what are the limitations of this technology if we wanted to bring back the shape that Canova imagined for this statue. So as you could see, one first step of the process involved putting together all the different elements that were recorded using as a first stage software like Polyworks, and then it was possible to see what are the missing areas. But then sometimes it is not enough just to join the parts. It is necessary to go with even more specific software for 3D modeling, for organic modeling like ZBrush. And this is what Irene was putting into practice by actually finish modeling all the different parts for which we didn't have information, for which we didn't have enough information. So as a complement to joining the scan areas, she was trying to model all the elements that didn't exist anymore. This was an exercise actually to show what are the possibilities of these techniques. And the result is that at some point of the process, it was necessary, as we were doing earlier with the Caravaggio painting, it was necessary to make a small scale 3D print of all these parts in order to be 3D scanned again, because the final creation of the shape of the horse, it was not possible to be done only digitally. It was necessary to use, to collaborate with our sculptors, with our material sculptors, in order to come out with an harmonic shape. But then most of the work was carried out using old photographs as a reference, and Irene, which is the real expert on this technique, will be able to show the last example of this series, which is what we were doing with another project in Brazil, and she will be able to explain how this works. The result of this job with the equestrian horse, with the equestrian statue of Canova, is that we could create a version in bronze, and a small scale, 1:10 scale version in bronze, showing specifically what are the parts that are missing. And this was a good exercise to know exactly what it is there that could be captured with the 3D scanner and what had to be invented and recreated with digital restoration. This final project of the sacred cave of Kamakuwaka, I would like my colleague Irene to explain. So I will give the floor to her. So I will stop sharing my screen. I will.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Irene.
Carlos, I thought it was really interesting also to say from the Canova horse that it was really important to 3D print it, like in a physical object, to be able to know what's the weight and how it would stand up as well, because it's not the same to work a 3D model in your PC, which is something virtual where there's no gravity, than to 3D print it and assemble it as a puzzle and then see how it's really standing on its 3 legs. So yeah, I think I'm gonna share my screen. So my name is Irene. So I'm a digital sculptor in Factum, and so I work with many artists in contemporary art sculpting projects, but I also have the chance to participate in digital restoration projects. So I'm going to share 2 projects that we did recently. One is the cave of Kamakuwaka, and then another one is the Tomb of Tutankhamun. But it's a different thing. It's not really digital restoration, but I think it's important to show as well. So one sec. I don't know if you can see. Can you see my screen, the ZBrush?
Yes.
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, wait, I'm gonna bring up the cave. So as a starting point, I mean, I just opened the 3D file. So this is a photogrammetry scan of the cave of Kamakuwaka. And I'm going to show you also some images. Can you see the Photoshop? Yeah. So this is a bit where the cave stands. with the people from the Wajah community who go to this cave to pass on, let's say, their cultural heritage to the younger ones. So you can see that from the engravings, they start to tell their stories to the younger ones. And so what happened is that I think it's in a very special place where there's a big fight about this land, and the sacred cave of the Wajah community is not in a safe space. So I think they want to build like a train railway or something. So what they did was break parts of the engraving, so kind of like to say, yeah, get out of the way. And it's kind of like a very sad story. So you can see Akari here holding the bits that have fallen on the ground. And you can see here some pictures that they gave to us where you can see how they've chopped off these bits of stone from the cave. So, well, here is Arthur. He's doing like a pharaoh scan. And then what they did was a photogrammetry scan. So this would be a 3D render in color of the scan of the cave. So the thing is that the first task to be able to make a digital restoration of this, what's first necessary is to have a 3D file with enough resolution to be able to work on. And next was to be able to count with photographic documentation. So it was really important to have a good communication with the Wajah. They gave me many pictures they had before the cave was vandalized. So my first task was to, on one side you have the picture of the engraving, of the etching on the stone, and on the other side, on the left of the screen, you have the ZBrush software where I can see the 3D scan, the 3D model, and the color information, let's say, of the 3D scan. So what I had to do was a research of like localizing, or finding out what pieces were broken and how I could find the bas relief or the engraving that I was going to be able to sort of restore. So these are like screen captures of that process, which took quite a time to find. And then came after all that, let's say, research work, came the part where I had to, let's say, I'm going to take off the color of the scan so you can see the 3D information. Wait, one sec. Okay, so the good thing about photogrammetry is that you have 3D information and you have the color information, which you can separate. So it gives you a lot of information on what lies behind. So with the color from the 3D scan, it was easy to understand which part was broken, right? Because you can see it here. So what I did was create a mask to understand and to be able to separate this geometry from the rest of the cave, which was the part that was broken, and leave untouched the part that hadn't been vandalized. And there's like a technique in video games where you're able to take this geometry, map it, and project a height map or an image, let's say, something that works like this. So out of any image, let's say, you're able to convert it into a displacement map, which gives you an information on height, because it has a grayscale value. So what that permits you is to give you sort of some reference on height. The thing is that from a picture, it's kind of, how do you say? it's not very real. At the end, you are the one giving the height. So what was important is that I had the 3D model to really understand what was going where, let's say, with the deepness of the engraving on the 3D model. So what I did was take this area, the area that was vandalized, find the picture that was matching that area, map it in a software that's called Maya. All the, let's say, for example, in 3D, you have like it's like pattern making. You can unwrap, let's say, a cube and make it flat, and you can project an image onto it, and then it will fold again and become a cube, and at the end you're able to map, let's say, a 2D image onto a 3D volume. So that's a bit the same technique that was used here, only this, let's say, was pretty flat. So this is the, let's say, like the pattern making. So I project onto this mesh, and with this picture, I was able to, let's say, understand more or less the height, and then adapt it onto the 3D photogrammetry model. So more or less the process was like this on all the bits that I could find. And then what I did was make a high resolution map of all the bits that were restored, print it on A4s, numbered, so the Wauja could put them on the floor, and with some acetate paper on top, they actually corrected whatever they thought was missing, or maybe I misunderstood some engraving, and they actually corrected it for me. So here you can see the Wauja understanding and you know, correcting the engravings with the renders I made. This was like a pretty interesting process because we were communicating thousands of kilometers away. So that's why technology is wonderful in these cases. So at the end, I had their their drawings on top of the, let's say, on top of the restored models I made. And so it was really interesting because it's true that some parts I couldn't read them. For example, here I had really no clue. There was, I don't know, some lines or some different etchings that I had missed. And so at the end, well, what I did was adapt their drawings back onto the 3D model. So for example, here, what's in color is their additions that I later added on to the 3D engravings. And so, yeah, I think this is one of the projects for what would be like digital restoration with the Wauja community. And then the next project that I wanted to share with you.
May, Irene?
Yeah.
I just want to say that at the end, all this work of digital restoration ended up being a physical rematerialization of the full cave.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's true. I should probably
maybe
show.
You have pictures.
Yeah.
That was my question too.
1 second, I have it here.
So it was possible to reconstruct the full cave based on the 3D data that we captured, incorporating all the restorations by Irene. The reconstruction is actually now in Madrid, in our facilities, in our workshops in Factum. Eventually, it would be ideal situation to be able to bring the facsimile, the reconstruction, back to Brazil. And it would be a way to highlight this idea of, okay, what is missing, what was destroyed, it was reconstructed. So in a way, you know, there is hope for this type of cultural heritage to survive.
I mean, I just went directly on the website because
that's the best.
I didn't have the pictures, but here they're, so they actually milled each part of the cave 1-to-1 scale. So I think it was a huge task, milling everything and then adding the color by hand with photographic references. We had, Akari and his son, they sort of like gave their blessing on this cave facsimile, let's say. And I think it was really interesting and very nice because it became sort of a platform for them to speak about all of the issues and all of the problems they're going through because of people trying to, kick them out of their land.
Did it ever move to Brazil or?
No, actually, the project was what would have been interesting, and I think what Adam wants is to maybe make this copy of the cave travel with the Waja to different cities, so they can actually talk about their situation. So it kind of serves as a platform and as a symbol of reconstruction, I think. And I think we're still looking for funding, but I'm sure it will happen sometime soon.
Amazing project.
Yeah. And so the next project is the Tomb of Tutankhamun. So this is something that I started working out during confinement. I'm specialized in ZBrush. I'm a 3D modeler, but I discovered, this engine that's called Unreal Engine, that is an amazing software that's actually used in video games. It's capable of creating real-time renders in like extremely photographic, realistic qualities. It's also used in the cinema industry now, in architecture, to make also visualizations, and it's being more and more used by all sort of industries to be able to show 3D content, let's say, and the quality is really good. So what I really wanted to do was sort of, I think it's a great way to be able to, I think it's becomes like a democratic tool to be able to share high resolution information. In this case, the Tutankhamun tomb. I think we have really high quality 3D models and very high quality photographic documentation of the tomb. So what I did was sort of learn how to optimize the 3D scans that we have to be able to view this real time. Because actually, this is also, you could also put on some goggles, and this could be like you could be inside. Let's say it's also specialized in virtual reality. So the thing is that to get to here, you have to learn how to optimize very high resolution models. As you know, in Factum, the models are very, very heavy. It's like sometimes it's really difficult to handle in the computer. So to get to this part, you can also see this, for example. It's great because you can also see it without the color information. So I think it's something that's very interesting to be able to, understand and to read the hieroglyphs without the color information. or maybe, I don't know, to understand what's going on with the walls, with these sort of mushrooms that have been growing. I think all of these are fungus, these like dots. So you have the possibility with the software to be in the space, to be able to close up and see things like in pretty high detail for what real time means. So real time means rendering in real time means that you can view this and the computer doesn't have to calculate light, color, the 3D model to be able to get a good render view. So sort of, I mean, the process is a little techy. It's kind of difficult to explain fast, but I've opened it up here. For example, the lid of the tomb, of the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun, for example. I think it's very interesting also because this lid was scanned in 2009 with when photogrammetry wasn't invented yet. So it was scanned with white light scanner by the Factum team. So this is sort of how they would do it. They have like these projectors that project this, I think, white light, and what they do is capture the 3D information. So they don't really capture color. So color was scanned with normal photography, what's called panoramic photography. So it's separate from the 3D surface. It's not like photogrammetry where they are both aligned, let's say. So this is sort of the quality, which is really high quality, that was scanned in 2009. The thing is that it scans in a way where you don't have the complete model. So as you can see, we're missing the sides and the bottom part, but it does give a lot of information on the rock and on the hieroglyphs. So one of the tasks was to reconstruct the parts that were missing. So I sort of had to model the sides. The bottom isn't really interesting, but I had to give it some surface noise, sort of like to make it look like the real one. And so once you have like a good high resolution model, as you can see, if I put the wireframe, it's like a 43 million vertice model. So it's almost 4 gigabytes. It's very heavy to be able to render real time on any computer. Good thing is that ZBrush can handle very heavy files, so it's really good for this. So the next step to be able to take this sort of model into Unreal Engine is you have to decimate it. So you have to optimize it. So in order to project the high resolution information onto an optimized model. So for that, there's an amazing software that's called Marmoset, which is very, very similar to Unreal because it's also real-time rendering. As you can see, I can move the light real time. And so what you basically do in this software after you decimate it. So let's say if this would be the low polygon model. Just so you understand a bit. You have to first decimate it in ZBrush. So let's say from 40 million, it goes down to 50,000, okay? 50,000 vertices. Once you have this, it's the same technique that's used in video games. You have to create a let's say a UV map. So in order to be able to add any sort of image, color, or any sort of texture map, you need to give it some coordinates, all right? So once I had this, the next step is passing on to Marmoset, where what it does is it bakes, so it projects the high resolution information. So this is my high resolution model, all right, onto the low resolution model. So this one. So this is like, it's pretty amazing because it's almost the same quality as the high resolution model, and it's just 50,000 vertices. So the trick here is that if you extract it, what it does, it extracts several maps. So there's this normal map, for instance. If I take it off, you start to see all the triangulation. If I add it on, it gives the effect. It copies the height, let's say, of the high resolution model. Then we also have another map that's called the Roughness Map. So the roughness, what it gives is it tells you how shiny is a surface. So, you know, marble sometimes is polished on some areas and on others is completely matte. So it doesn't have any surface shine on it. So here, for example, if we look at it from a side, you see it has a little bit of shininess onto it because it's kind of similar to marble. And then you also have another map, which is very nice, which is the Ambient Occlusion Map. So if I take it off, you'll see the difference. When I put it on, what it's telling us is it's giving like the shadows, the model has. And then finally, the color map. So basically, this is what an optimized model consists of. It's, let's say, projecting high resolution detail from a 3D scan that's been previously retouched, let's say, in a way, even though that it shouldn't really be done. A digital restorer shouldn't really retouch any scan, but in this case, it's a little different because the project was about, you know, kind of like the Tomb of Tutankhamun was rematerialized. It's never been assembled in 3D. I think it's the first time someone does this because, for example, the sarcophagus is also the same. When I started opening the files, it was the scan from 2009 called Rescan was scanning parts. It doesn't scan the sarcophagus as one piece altogether. So it's what I had to do was like align everything in ZBrush and fix all the parts that didn't really come out. Like, for example, here you have a little hole. So it's sort of like digital restoration, let's say, because all of the parts that were missing were modeled or were copied from, let's say, like this bit is like a cut and paste from this scan and put behind here. To be able to, like the interior as well wasn't scanned. So this is also totally created 3D model. The bottom as well, it was impossible to scan underneath, obviously. Well, this is also, for example, there was an issue because since there hasn't been any color scanned from the sarcophagus, this is sort of a recreation with a software called Substance Painter, where you can paint 3D models. And this is from the facsimile that was done in Egypt. So this was painted by Factum's team. And you can see that's a big difference, but there's a lot of information missing in color in this case on the 3D model. This is the baking process in marmoset. So it also had to be done in parts to be able to gain resolution. So as you see, I had to separate the sarcophagus in 4 parts. So these sides, the other 2, here's the lid, like put back on the top. And then this is another part of the sarcophagus to finally get the whole thing. This is also like to see the difference in color. It's really bad, actually, this color. We really like this one. And yeah, I think this is about it. I think it's more than enough, I think.
Thank you, Irene.
Yeah.
What Irene was saying right now about this idea of the real-time rendering is super important, because until she started experimenting with software like this, there was no real way of us communicating the quality of the 3D data we captured. The size of the files we manage are normally so big that even if you have powerful computers, you sometimes have troubles trying to visualize that on screen. But if what you want to do is communicating to a wider audience this information to make it accessible online or as part of an immersive environment, it was just an oversimplification. So most of the virtual environments that we are used to see, even with video games, that they work nicely for what they want, for what they are intended to do. But when you want to get closer and look at the surface quality, for example, without the color texture, then you notice how simplified the models usually are. So yeah.
Yeah, because actually in video games, they're not really specialized, or their intention is not for you to analyze a surface. Maybe this is more a scientific approach. And I think it's really interesting, well, to use technology in this way, because I mean, it's possible to export this project from Unreal Engine of the Tomb of Tutankhamun, and someone else can open it in their computer, I don't know, or at any university, and people can, you know, be in here with some Oculus Rift, let's say, or use any PC to really, you know, zoom in and be able to, you know, it's like a really nice approach on making it democratic, to be able to, well, there's no need to travel, no, there's no need to go to see the real one, when, I mean, you can see it from your computer in enough high resolution, let's say, in a model that's good enough that you can understand the surface or the color. I think in that way, it's a really good thing.
And also, this project is a great example of what is digital preservation in general, because I find very interesting that the information that we captured back in 2009, it was made for one specific purpose, which was to make a facsimile, a physical replica.
Yeah.
But then 12 years after, as technology has evolved, it is possible to go back to these original scans, as long as they were recorded with enough resolution, with enough quality, and in formats that you can now rework with them and give them a new life through new technologies. So this is, at the end, what is essential when you are thinking of recording cultural heritage. You should do it in a way and in a format that you are not closing doors for further developments in the future. If you are simplifying data at the moment that you are capturing it, you are not allowing for developments like this in the future.
Yeah, and developments will go further on, because the quality here is good, but it's going to be even better. And the quality of the scans from 2009 is unbelievable. I mean, now the quality here is really good, but it can go even more. The thing is that computers still, they need more power, and I mean, there needs to be more developing, but it's pretty impressive that scans from 2009 can give such a quality. I mean, it's impressive.
So I would like to invite you, if you have questions or comments to the projects we mentioned today. It's the moment.
Yes, in English, Italian, or Spanish as well, as usual. Thank you very much to both of you. And it's really interesting projects, really important, also important message. I have a first question. It's about two questions. Is this real-time rendering shared yet? Can I find it somewhere or not yet?
So real-time rendering is, can you explain? So real-time rendering is when you render, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like the computer doesn't need to make any calculations. You don't need to wait. For example, I work with other softwares, let's say ZBrush. If I want to give you a good render of this lid, I have to press a button. I press this button and it's starting to render samples. It's starting to calculate light in order to give me a good image of the 3D model. Okay, so in this software, the amazing thing is that you can work with light, or this one, for example, you can move light real time. You don't need to wait. You know, it's like it's a new way of seeing things, and it's a new way of it really comes from video games, and it's starting to be adapted to everything, because it makes it it's much easier for people to have immersive experiences, let's say. But it's not something you can really have. You need a software for it, or you need to be in a game, or you need to open a project which has this programmed already for you to be able to move around in real time.
So, for example, if it has to be a way of studying the Tutankhamun tomb, it should be like put in a video game project, maybe. Yep. So a scholar would, let's say, play with it.
Well, let's say, have you ever tried the Oculus Rift? Have you ever put the virtual reality goggles on?
Yeah.
Well, you could do that perfectly with Tutankhamun. So this is made specifically for that. The only thing is that you can also visualize it from your computer, but you could as well be walking here in player mode. Now I'm not in player mode, but wait one sec. It's the same, really. If you press play, so now it's like you're in the game. If you had goggles, well, you'd be like, but you can't pass these walls. Let's say you bump into this, you can get close. It would be the same experience, but with the goggles on, and you'd be inside this tomb. That's the magic. That's the magic about Unreal Engine, that it's actually made for this, for immersive experiences. But if you don't have these glasses, you can see it perfectly as well from your computer, like in video games.
If I'm right, this specific application of Tutankhamun that Irene has been working on, it's not public yet, so we have not put it available.
Yeah,
but it will soon, I guess.
I have a question also to a previous project you showed us, Atlas in this case. The Hermitage of San Baudelio. What was the final output the final shape of the digital restoration? Because in some cases you showed us for example, a physical replica, in other case, a model. And in that case, was it, you didn't show the physical one, so I guess it was...
Exactly, no, you're right. With the San Baudelio project, it was purely a research project that remained digital. We never created a physical reproduction of it, but the intention was to eventually be able to reconstruct entirely the interior space of the Hermitage physically as a facsimile in real size, in real scale, and then maybe having two versions, maybe having one version with the way the walls look right now in the church, and then another version with the walls, with the wall paintings reconstructed digitally. And of course, it would be an ideal case for an Unreal Engine browser as well. So it's somewhere you can play with turning on and off different layers, maybe the same way as we are turning on and off the color texture. You can maybe go back and forth between reconstructed and original state of the walls. So what we were doing years ago was a research project on a digital level. But this is, in a way, this project comes back to us every few years. Hopefully we will be able to work again on it very soon and make a physical replica finally.
I see, because in a way that is way more pop, let's say, I was thinking to the projection of the light as you showed for other figures, maybe it would be more.
There are of course levels on that. You can use projection mapping to project the color. You can also use augmented reality. You can look at the walls through your phone, through any device, and then decide if you want to see the reconstructed color. So exactly, there are levels. We are always interested on a physical facsimile, but there are other ways to disseminate this information and to give access to others through other media.
Thanks. We have a question from Gaio Trombino. I'm going to read it for you. Do you think that version 5 of Unreal Engine will make it easier to employ this technique so more people could be encouraged to share high-resolution 3D content?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's still like in a beta version, so they're still working on things, but they've paired up with reality capture. So that means that they're thinking about photogrammetry, and they are making things much easier. But even though it's still there's still a lot of work previously before putting in your 3D models in the software. It's not a drag and drop of, you know, I wish it was like that. I wish in the future it's going to be something like that, where it's going to be almost drag and drop. But for the moment, you still need to optimize models. So it's a bit like the process that I've been showing you with video games. Even though version 5 is going to make things better, it's not going to be a drag and drop yet.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we saw that. It looks like a lot of work. So, I don't see no questions, but I invite again people if they have some in the very last minute. If not, maybe if you don't have anything to add.
Okay.
If there are no more questions, or Irene, you want to say something else?
Just that it was my pleasure to be here, and I hope if you have any questions later on or whatever, well, I'll be available if anyone wants to write to me. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Irene for her time, for opening her screen and her computer to us, and everyone in Factum who participated in these sessions. And of course, thank you, Costanza, for your time and making this possible. And thank you everyone who has been attending this course. as Irene said, we are available for answering more questions. The website is full of more information about our projects and future developments. And of course, keep an eye on what will be happening in archive in the next months, because new exciting projects will be happening. So watch this space.
Okay, well, bye everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.